When you think of the great centers of the 1980s NBA, names like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Moses Malone, and Robert Parrish immediately come to mind. But there's another name that should be part of that conversation, one that many casual fans might not recognize today: Jeff Ruland. His story is both inspiring and heartbreaking, a tale of incredible talent meeting devastating injury at the worst possible time. Jeff Ruland's basketball journey began at Iona College, where he played from 1977 to 1980. Standing 6 feet 11 inches with a robust frame that would eventually fill out to around 280 pounds, Ruland was the kind of player who dominated the paint through sheer physical presence and surprising athleticism for his size. At Iona, Ruland wasn't just big, he was skilled. He could shoot from mid-range, had soft hands around the basket, and possessed the kind of court vision that made him dangerous as both a scorer and facilitator. During his time with the Gales, he established himself as one of the premier college centers in the country, averaging impressive numbers that caught the attention of NBA scouts. Coaches and teammates talked about his ability to make everyone around him better. He understood angles, timing, and how to use his body effectively without relying solely on brute force. The college game in the late 1970s was still very much a big man's game, and Ruland fit perfectly into that era. He could battle in the post with anyone, but he also had the finesse to step away from the basket when needed. By his senior year, he was being mentioned alongside the top center prospects in the country. The Washington Bullets selected Jeff Ruland in the first round of the 1980 NBA draft, though he didn't make his debut until the 1981-82 season due to various circumstances. When he finally stepped onto an NBA court, it became immediately clear that his college success would translate to the professional level. Ruland's early years in Washington were a gradual build-up to what would become one of the most dominant interior presences in the league. The Bullets were a team in transition, looking to build around young talent, and Ruland quickly established himself as a cornerstone player. His combination of size, skill, and basketball intelligence made him a natural fit for the NBA game. What really set Ruland apart during his Washington years was his versatility. At a time when most centers were expected to simply camp in the paint, Ruland could step out and hit jumpers, make passes that guards would envy, and even handle the ball in transition situations. He wasn't the fastest player on the court, but he was always in the right position, always making the smart play. The mid-1980s represented the peak of Ruland's career. During the 1983-84 and 1984-85 seasons, he was virtually unstoppable. He averaged over 20 points and 10 rebounds per game, shot an impressive percentage from the field, and was selected to back-to-back NBA All-Star games in 1984 and 1985. These weren't token selections either. Ruland was genuinely one of the best centers in the league during this period. Playing alongside Rick Mahorn, Ruland formed one of the most intimidating frontcourts in the NBA. While Mahorn provided the muscle and intimidation, Ruland brought the skill and finesse. Together, they made the Bullets a legitimate playoff contender and one of the tougher teams to play against in the Eastern Conference. Just as Ruland was entering what should have been the prime years of his career, disaster struck. Chronic knee and back problems began to plague him during his final seasons in Washington. These weren't minor nagging injuries. They were career-threatening conditions that would ultimately rob basketball of one of its most promising talents. The injuries were particularly cruel because they came just as Ruland was reaching his peak. He had developed into exactly the kind of player every team wanted, a skilled big man who could score, rebound, pass, and anchor a defense. But the human body can only take so much punishment, and the combination of his size and the physical nature of 1980s basketball had taken its toll. After his injury-shortened time in Washington, Ruland signed with the Philadelphia 76ers for the 1986-87 season. The Sixers were a veteran team looking to make one more championship run, and they hoped that Ruland could provide the interior presence they needed alongside an aging, but still effective Moses Malone. Unfortunately, Ruland's time in Philadelphia was brief and largely unsuccessful. The injuries that had hampered him in Washington continued to be a problem, and he was never able to recapture the form that had made him an all-star. He played in only a handful of games before his body betrayed him once again. The Philadelphia experiment was frustrating for everyone involved. The Sixers needed Ruland to be the player he had been in Washington, but that player no longer existed. The injuries had robbed him of the mobility and consistency that had made him special, leaving behind a shadow of his former self. After several years away from basketball, trying to rehabilitate his injuries and get his body right, Ruland attempted another comeback with the Philadelphia 76ers during the 1991-92 season. This was a different Sixers team from the one he had briefly joined in 1987, younger, hungrier, and desperate for veteran leadership. Ruland's final NBA stop came with the Detroit Pistons during the 1992-93 season. The Pistons, fresh off their championship runs in the late 1980s and early 1990s, were looking for veteran depth, and Ruland represented a low-risk, potentially high-reward signing. By this point, everyone involved understood the limitations. Ruland wasn't going to be the dominant force he had been in Washington, but there was hope that he could provide spot minutes and veteran leadership. Unfortunately, even this modest role proved beyond his physical capabilities. The Detroit stint was brief and served more as a farewell tour than a legitimate basketball contribution. It was clear that Ruland's playing days were numbered, and after the 1992-93 season, he officially retired from professional basketball. Jeff Ruland's career statistics, while impressive, don't tell the full story of his impact on basketball. During his peak years in Washington, he was as dominant as any center in the league. His combination of size, skill, and basketball intelligence made him a unique player who could have been a cornerstone for championship-contending teams. The tragedy of Ruland's career isn't just personal. It's also about what basketball fans were denied. In an era where skilled big men were becoming increasingly rare, Ruland represented a throwback to an earlier time when centers could do everything: score, rebound, pass, and anchor a defense. His injuries robbed the NBA of a player who could have been a Hall of Fame talent. What makes Ruland's story particularly poignant is the timing of his injuries. He wasn't a player who had already achieved everything and was winding down his career. He was a player on the rise, someone who was just beginning to scratch the surface of his potential when his body failed him. Looking back at his career now, it's impossible not to wonder what if. What if the injuries hadn't occurred? What if he had been able to play in an era with better medical care and injury prevention? What if he had been born with more durable knees and back? These questions will never be answered, but Jeff Ruland's brief moment in the sun reminds us that sometimes the most compelling stories in sports aren't about championships and records. They're about talent unfulfilled and dreams deferred. His career may have been shorter than it should have been, but for those who saw him play during his peak years, there's no doubt that Jeff Ruland belonged among the elite centers of his generation. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you guys. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and stay safe.